Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach, on this chilly morning. I would say that we could I would make some metaphor about the lights of the menorah warming us up or something like that, but we can't even do that because we can't use the light of the menorah for warmth. We can use the light of the Shabbat candles for warmth, but not the light of the Chanukiah, because we're only supposed to use that to share it outwardly with others. We can't take advantage of the Chanukiah at all for our own benefits. It's just for public display. I've been thinking a lot about that, how maybe thanks to Chabad really taking over Hanukkah as a public expression and making sure there are Chanukiot on every turnpike exit. Right when you're entering the Lincoln Tunnel, you see a giant Chanukiah, and having these public menorah lightings everywhere. I was having a conversation with Mayor Dean Daffis, the mayor of Maplewood, as we were preparing a menorah lighting on Springfield Avenue in the Hilton neighborhood of Maplewood. And we said, do we need to have another menorah lighting? We have one in Spayota Park. There's one in Rickleton Square in downtown Maplewood. And he said that Hilton neighborhood residents asked for one in that part of Maplewood. And the truth is, with rising anti-Semitism, we should have more menorah lightings, not less. And that was a very powerful idea, a very powerful image. The idea that we should be lighting the menorah more, we should be having more public celebrations of Judaism and our Jewish faith. And as that was happening in Maplewood, there were menorah lightings that I guess my invitation got lost in the mail at the White House with the President and First Lady. Also, the next night, which is really, last year was the first of its kind, at the Naval Observatory, where the Vice President resides, with the Vice President and the Second Gentleman. And what really struck me about that at these menorah lightings, the Second Gentleman, Vice President's husband, Doug Emhoff, insisted on being the one to light the Chanukiah. That as the first Jewish person in this position, either in a position in the president or vice president or a spouse of somebody in the executive branch with such a high level of authority and power, that he thought it was powerful for him to be the one lighting the Chanukiah. He lit the Chanukiah at the National Menorah Lighting in DC, in the National Mall. And he gave an interview last year where he didn't think initially it was such a big deal that he was Jewish in this role, in this position. He's like, listen, my wife just got elected as the first woman of color to be vice president. I'm, this Jew, a cultural Jew at best, he said. And then he realized how big of a deal it was for the Jewish community that he was married to the Vice President of the United States. And he told this story about how, he was somebody who identified mostly as a cultural Jew. Somebody who finally convinced his parents, growing up in the Matawan and Old Bridge area of New Jersey, convinced his parents to let him become a bar mitzvah because he felt left out in his middle school, which at the time was about 30% Jewish. Everybody, all the other Jews were having b'nai mitzvah, and he wanted that experience. He even spent a summer at CLC, at Cedar Lake Camp, the New Jersey Y Camp. But it was all about the communal and cultural identity of Judaism. When he took on this role of Second Gentleman, he all of a sudden, he said, became connected to ritual and religious expression. In fact, a colleague of mine, Rabbi Peter Berg, who's a rabbi of the temple, the Peachtree Street Temple in Atlanta, was famous for being the Jewish institution in Atlanta, which proudly and loudly fought for civil rights. Dr. King preached there, so much so that synagogue was bombed during the civil rights movement because Dr. King preached there. Peter Berg came and for the first time ever put a mezuzah on the entrance to the Naval Observatory. There was the very first Passover Seder at the Naval Observatory. During the Obama administration, they began having Passover Seders in the West Wing with some of his staff. But to have the second gentleman want to lead a Seder in his own home, which happens to be a home which we, the American people, have our elected officials reside in, was a powerful image. And I think about that, juxtaposed with what we read this morning, the sort of part 2 of the Joseph narrative, where Joseph was so set on having his dream fulfilled. In prison, he's remembered, and he's called upon to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, and Pharaoh rewards him. He rewards him with fine Egyptian robes and garbs. He rewards him with an Egyptian jewelry, a gold chain, and gives him the Egyptian name, Tzafnat Paneach. In order for Joseph to become the viceroy of Egypt, he takes a step back on his Israelite identity, on being a son of Yaakov, on being part of this covenant with God, on being part of Bnei Israel. He casts that aside, so much so that when his brothers come to him years later asking for food, they don't even recognize him at all. His identity has changed so much, as if his Judaism is hidden or forgotten. So you have that image. And then you have this image of the second gentleman who grew up Jewish, not caring about his Judaism, religiously speaking at least. And now, in a position of power, has embraced Jewish ritual and Jewish identity, is leading a task force, was put in charge by President Biden, leading a task force to combat rising anti-Semitism in this country. You can be in a position of power and hide your Judaism. A Jewish historian suggested that 2 generations ago that would have been the case. 2 generations ago, to succeed in such a position, you would actually have to cast that aside. However, this past generation, we see the opposite of somebody embracing their uniqueness, embracing their Judaism in such a position. I think about that as we display our Chanukiot, our menorahs, and our windows for all to see, publicly and proudly. A pop quiz. Why did Hanukkah last for 8 days? The trick question. Yes. Not because of the oil and the menorah, it's because Sukkot lasted for 8 days. If you read the book of Maccabees, which is not a part of the Hebrew Bible, probably should have been, but for political reasons was not, but is one of the apocryphal books that is in the Christian Bible's Old Testament. It speaks of when the Jewish people and the Maccabees rededicated the temple. The first thing that they did was they began celebrating the holidays that they did not have the opportunity to celebrate when it was desecrated. When Antiochus, the Assyrian Greeks, Hellenized the community and forced the Maccabees to this guerrilla warfare, fighting. And they celebrated Sukkot months delayed. That idea, not just the public expression of Judaism, but the idea of a delayed celebration, even if it's delayed, it's not too late to embrace proudly that Jewish identity, arguably is more powerful than lighting the menorah and putting it in the window. An image that no matter how late in life, like Rabbi Akiva, who did not learn the Aleph Bet until he was 40, no matter how late in life, a ritual or a religious expression is delayed, it is never too late to have meaning and to have significance. So even if at times we take on our metaphorical Egyptian names and wear our metaphorical Egyptian linen garbs, that's part of this balancing act of living in society and not ostracizing ourselves, but fully embracing being a part of society, because we know as society influences religion, our faith also influences society. Let us never hide our identities. Let us embrace them. And let us take this opportunity for all those things which we have previously delayed and ignored. Let those rituals be which shines bright, which we proudly display in our windows for all to see, not just on Hanukkah, but each and every day. Shabbat Shalom.